I thank you, Art. My gosh, it is so good to hear your great voice in the air again. Probably what George started doing coach in 2004, and I think that 2003 or the end of 2003 was our last coach together in Greenland. Yes. From the broadcast, and hopefully what we have worked on together we can do in another dark matter at some point here in the upcoming future. There's something I want to ask you about up front. It's not, I mean, it's just, right. I'm getting increasingly frantic emails about Fukushima. Now, has no idea how to stop it. Like scientists have no idea how to change the nuclear reactors are right now. About nuclear war, about tests that are bursting. It just sounds like a mess, you know. Serious mess, and right now. Yeah, I keep up with it through a professor who teaches in Japan, as well as people on the East Coast who have been following the Fukushima, what they call it, a catastrophe equal to or greater than Chernobyl. And the most recent in-depth report I did goes back to August 29th. And that is right, I think it was just 1 week after what is called the Tokyo Electric Power Company, and that's where you hear that word TEPCO. It was one of the most depressing announcements that I think I've ever heard, that they had lost or had been leaking 80,000 gallons of highly radioactive water for an entire month, and no one knew until the end of August when they finally hung up to this. And at this time, that 80,000 tons, that's about 300 tons of this leaking water, is containing strontium-90. And strontium-90, as you know, is a bone-keeping isotope. It stays in the body. It has a half-life of 30 years, which means when it's breaking down the radioactivity of strontium-90, and then we have cesium-137 there too, but strontium is going to take with cesium about 300 years to get back to background. And that means, without question, there's going to be increases in bone cancer, cancer of nearby tissues, and leukemia. And that professor who stays in touch with me on his wife and his children from Japan to Australia because of his own, he was keeping a radiation monitor around his yard and the school where his young children played, and he was finding enough above background that was contradicting what the Japanese government was saying was safe 8 miles away from Fukushima. And on top of all of this, because of just the last announcement that they had lost track of that 80,000 gallons, it provoked the International Atomic Energy Agency to basically go to Japan and say, how could this happen? And now they raised that level from the United Nations, they have the 7-point international nuclear and radiological event scale, and it went up after 2.5 years from the first 3/11 disaster. The crisis went up to a level 3 now again. It's climbing back up toward Chernobyl. And one of the things that when I asked Dave Watson, he's director of the Nuclear Safety Project for the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I asked him, what do you guys understand about the radioactivity of this water? What kind of exposure are we talking about? And he said, when some objective readings were taken at the end of August, along with that technical announcement, it showed that if you or anybody were standing 2 feet from the water, the 80,000 tons or gallons in state, you would get the equivalent of 5 years worth of radiation in just 1 hour. Yeah. Mine was coming within the Asia, so we were very concerned about that. The range combination comes in and these work for a transfer figure when they do, so it's better about that. But one of the problems, everyone is and we have some those fish. We have fish. And when it's along the way, they're on the way. And I wanted to see the fishing right. But that is one of the most complicated questions in my other file recording. I have continually asked, how safe is Japan's fish and farm food? And there's all over the map. The professor, who is written there, and he has people who have gone into the supermarket with radiation counters. They have said, we especially, I won't eat any seafood. I've changed my entire diet. And so now that's from somebody who's living there. And here is now referred to somebody on the outside who is not living there, but is trying to monitor in the Pacific coast of Fukushima, and that's Greenpeace. Greenpeace has, 50 years ago, they put out a warning that they were seeing much higher than normal radiation in some of the fish that they caught. But what happened today? There was a newspaper article in which the Japanese government is saying, no, if they've done sampling of fish in there, there's nothing to be concerned about. Here's the professor and everyone I interviewed, and that includes people in both Tokyo and Fukushima. And they say, and this is a quote, we can't trust anything the Japanese government says anymore, and that's why so many people are trying to do their own monitoring, but they're up against this. This is a fascinating cultural aspect of Japan. The government always had a policy, it's treated as a metaphor of the beautiful white lace gloves that were on the cover of one of the news magazines after the horror of 3/11 of a woman who still had on her white lace gloves up against her forehead, surrounded by the ocean water and the trash. And the professor who said to me, this is a country in which everything always goes to politeness. No one talks to families about cancer or sickness. And the government does not want anyone to talk about the radiation from Fukushima. They've got the Olympics now, on everything to be fine. And now we're talking about a contradiction between what is a political policy and what is the reality of a few people there who are trying to get data to the rest of us on the outside. And when did all this come down? A professor won't eat any of the seafood in any market anywhere in Japan where he is living. But Greenpeace has reported that they have made sure that radioactive rice, beef, fruit, vegetables, milk, and baby formula. And as recently as January 2013, I'm reading from the notice from Greenpeace, quote, fish caught off the coast of Fukushima measures 250,000 becquerels per kilogram of radioactive cesium. Now, what does that mean? That amount of radioactive cesium is 2,540 times the legal limit for human consumption. I spent a lot of time in Japan, and that cultural comment is so right for the Japanese wonderful people that they're not perfect and they stay on the way to a fault. And definitely in some trips, I really decided it's scary. It's actually scary me because you're in that, if you look at where it's falling from, that's the example. The house comes in really from northwest line down to the desert southwest. You know, we're in there with one of the questions with your mind and I'm the leader. And that is the course, the one science where they are. And that's true. Well, I realize the terms that this music you can tend to have a reaction. I know that in the dangerous area, and I'm not talking about atomic explosion. I'm talking about the cost of radiation. Is it possible? Okay, I sent that exact question to Dave Washbaum at the Nuclear Safety Project, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and to Arnie Gunderson, who does fairwinds, and he has a strong nuclear engineering background, and he's been extremely concerned about Fukushima. In fact, it was Arnie Gunderson who first said, on 2/11, this is going to be worse than Chernobyl once we realize that I think people need to get a picture in their head that the spent fuel rods, all of that radioactive water, is in units, so 6 units, 4 of which were involved in the catastrophe, are 100 feet above the ground. I think people haven't kept that in mind. The construction is the spent water and spent fuel rods are above the ground, the nuclear cores are below the ground, and so TEPCO and the Japanese government have had this two-headed monster on their hands now since the 11th. Worrying about what's going to happen if all that radioactive water that they've been trying to get into now, there's 1,000 tanks, and they keep building tanks that are full of all this radioactive water. Something serious has to happen, and that's why in just the last 3 or 4 weeks, there's been a discussion about how can they get those nuclear cores that are still so radioactive underground out, and can they do it safely? And meanwhile, what do they do about all of the spent radioactive water in the spent fuel, where the spent fuel rods are above ground? And that's why the Japanese government, in sort of desperation, is saying that they are willing to spend several $1 billion to literally build an ice core in a circle around all of the Fukushima TEPCO land. And that right now is what's on the next docket. But between now and then, many people are saying they're going to have to get those nuclear cores out. That's right. That's because of that problem of the fuel water in the rise 100 feet above ground. Well, all units have this issue, but that's unit 4. And so now, the only light at the end of the tunnel that I can give you on this most recent correspondence was that both Dave Wallstrom and Arnie said that they do not think right now that getting the nuclear cores out have reached any kind of a emergency situation. It depends on how the approach is done. But the Japanese government is now on top of TEPCO. They have officially said they are taking over all the next steps because TEPCO has not been effective, and TEPCO is a company now that no one in Japan believes, so they have a gigantic credibility problem. And right now in the United States, I think you raised an extremely good question, or what will the consequences be in the next year? The plan loses control again of any of those steps. We'll call it the fuel rod water that's radioactive, the spent fuel. And those cores underneath Plus, they have over 1,000 containers now of all of that wastewater that they've been gathering. If there is another earthquake, and it hits land and splits land, and those containers break, or those cords break, or more of that spiritual flood water comes down, we're in another serious crisis, and it will be probably worse than Chernobyl. Well, I guess this comes is the personnel from looking at the I was actually wrong looking into the power because I think it's a battle. I do think that's what's happening. I know that the professor in Japan says that there really is, even in that polite society where there's not supposed to be protest, that there is this growing sense that the government would like to see their nuclear power reinstated and reinvigorated, but that there appears to be a political climate pushing against that. And in the United States, the very fact that there has been one closure of one of the troublesome nuclear power plants just in the last couple of months, and that there have been protests against several others, I personally do not see how the United States, with nuclear power plants of very similar construction, with some differences in some places, but are very similar parallels in some of our nuclear power plants in the United States, also on water. We could suffer something that would be similar to what happened to Fukushima. And who in the United States now would like to risk that after we have seen the horror of what is played out in Japan? So this is an ongoing story as Dave Lockbaum, leading of concerned scientists, and Arnie Gunderson have said to me, this is a story that is going to continue to unfold for at least the next 30 years. So I know for somebody who is a performer for this question, we sure have a lot of information. Thank you very much. All right, so we have a lot of words coming on some both left hand. Yes, well, yeah, so where do you want to go first? I thought it would be really fun to sort of take your audience now with you and with me back to, I'm going back to, and I'm holding in my hand, it is such original audio cassette that I put in my analog audio cassette player first. It's labeled 1978 Bigfoot Howe, 1 minute edited for Dreamland with Art Bell dated. Within June 18th, 1995. So that was, I first played this for you, and I thought it was so interesting in the Time magazine, those 4 pages that they did on you coming back, the DarkMAtter, that they put a list of iconic movies in Coast to Coast Land with Art Bell. And they said, they highlighted this one about the Bigfoot yells. And so I'm going to set the stage just a little, and we're going to hear this again. Very good. Yeah, I mean, we're doing 4 things on one magazine in terms of all right. Go ahead. Everybody go back in their minds and think 1978, old analog audio recorders, nothing digital, nothing modern. And this woman who lived in Snohomish, Washington, which is 30 miles sort of northeast of Seattle. She lived in this very forested area of the Snohomish Forest, which is famous for all kinds of strange creatures and animal mutilations and all kinds of things for years. And she sees and hears first a high-pitched sound she doesn't recognize and went out on her porch. And the way she describes it, that there were a couple, at least 2, 8 foot tall, and she used the words silverback, primate-looking creatures with dark, long hair, and they're standing at her gravel pit, which is about 100 feet from her porch. And they begin making this very high-pitched sound, so she ran into the house, God bless her, analog, and she stood on the back porch with the oil recorder in her hand, holding it towards the creature of the house. And this is the same excerpt that I played for you back in 1995 from that old, sort of slightly scratchy analog tape of December 1978. Here we go. That's amazing. Those are screams. You don't discount the stuff. I mean, but the screams were just horrific. And what would they come from? Well, now this is an eyewitness. That's what has always made this audio so powerful, and why I played it for you back in '95. Is that we have the eyewitness description of this woman standing on her porch, and she's looking at these 8-foot tall primates. And I don't think it was more than a month or so after that I had played this for you, and we had talked about the whole Sasquatch phenomena on coastal Greenland. And I thought this it was like an 8.5 by 11 or 14 package in the mail. And in it were a series of color drawings from a man that I called Steve Whitmore because he asked me to keep him anonymous. And he lived in Snohomish, Washington, too. And we were out splitting weeds on his dad's property on Easter weekend in 1977. And he said that he first heard a buzzing sound around him, and it made him look up, and to his complete amazement, daytime, blue sky, here is a big, he estimated 100-foot diameter silver disc, and it's coming right down to the top of one of the big evergreen trees, not too far from where he's growing weeds. And as the silver disc settles down over the tree starts moving wildly as if there were almost hurricane winds, and that was even further because it was a completely still day. But whatever was happening, it was generated by this disc. And then, now, as he said, he's standing almost paralyzed between fear and awe. And out of this craft, now, this is in your mind's eye, because you drew them, and I have all these illustrations in my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities. That's the second volume called Hydrangea. And so you see the drawings, and so I'm going to try to give you a word picture. Imagine columns of air coming down from this silver disc, and that the air has enough substance or motion or something that he can see that there are columns, that they're kind of translucent, and through these, or inside of these, he sees to each column, and this is his word, they look like Filipinos with brownish skin, slanted eyes, wearing a tight, ugly blue leotard, and they came down in these columns to the ground. And they didn't pay any attention to him, and they went off, and this happened apparently several times, because he said there were at least 9 of these blue-suited beings that went off into the forest, and he is staring, wondering what are they going to do if they did find him, when he hears, because he's watching after them, he hears a thud, and he returns, and there, coming down also in a beam from this craft is, and he said, 8 foot tall, long-haired Sasquatch, that proceeds to follow right after the sparkly blue-suited Filipino-looking beings. And then he told me that he went to his dad's house and he called the home sheriff's office. And he got a deputy on the phone named Jerry Phillips, who I got to interview as well. And he told deputy all about this and was shocked. And the deputy told him, Steve Bismarck, that the sheriff's office was getting a lot of phone calls about strange lights in the sky and unusual animal deaths, and so the deputy was coming out to check, because now this guy is reporting the UFO, the stuff. Now, Deputy Phillips, when I did an interview with him, told me that he went out all over and at exactly the place where Steve Bismarck took him and said, here's where these two bizarre air-like translucent beings hit the ground, and these beings and that sausage came down. Deputy Phillips told me that he found many, not one, but many egg-shaped holes in the ground. And then, further on, in the direction that all these creatures had gone, he found a huge 5-ton fridge. He made a plaster cast of it. I had a photograph in the book. I mean, it's gigantic. It's one of those 14, 17-inch long, 8, 10-inch wide feet with towers. And when the deputy began doing more field research around Steve Bismarck's house, he came upon what he said was one of the strangest animal deaths of that year and the next year when they were flooded with the bloodless, trackless animal mutilations. He said that hanging from a broken branch, something had broken a branch that was 9 to 10 feet off the ground, was a deer hanging by the scruff of its neck over the broken branch, and had the classic ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals, and rectum poured out, no blood.
Okay, where we even begin here, I guess I'm trying to picture the lady that we talked about, standing on the porch, with a paper facing 8-foot, 12-foot Sasquatch animals, swinging in a way that would cover the head of anybody, and not running in terror, taking off like, or something. I don't know. I couldn't find it. I couldn't sit there with that paper for it. But did you ever have an opportunity to ask John, the governor of Maine, if he was able to stop that?
But we had a tape and the letter and the correspondence were sent to me through an intermediary, and I heard her voice on the audio tape describing the dates and what she's doing, so I know her that way. But I can tell you that by being able to talk to the Sasquatch investigator who sent me this package, he said that she had heard these high-pitched sounds so many times in the forest that she had become accustomed, confused, puzzled. So that the day that for some reason they had felt comfortable enough to come up to her gravel pit, it wasn't like she was in fear of something that was immediately unknown. I remember that. She had been hearing it. And I think if I'd been in her shoes and I had a tape recorder, I would want to have taped this sound too. As long as
when the whole time we were taking a break here, at the moment we're talking about Bigfoot, so it's extremely interesting discussion. I am so curious about Bigfoot. I have been all these years. I had a million requests to replay what's window at play. I did hold by I was still no question about that. But something I wanted to know from wanted to have a very careful answer to this and see what you think.
Well, it sounds very similar. What is that?
If the recording live or is kept, whether if it's a better copy of what you have, or I don't know anymore, but that's what we're on a Bigfoot sound, or a Bigfoot sound, and the true sounds, true much the same way.
Well, I wanted to tell you this is reinforcing. It is separate audio. I've got the one from the woman, and one from yours sounds slightly different. And I'm going back now to June 25th, 2001. I got on an airplane and I took off for Hong Kong to work as a reporter with a video production group for a TV series on Discovery. They were based in Hong Kong, and that's where I went first. And then we got in more planes, and we went to Hanoi, Vietnam, and then to Vientiane, Laos. And then we went into an old Soviet truck to take that Route 9 up to where the DMZ was in the Vietnam War, where there were a bunch of people who had been reporting, and it had filtered into political authority in Vientiane, that they had seen something that the locals up at the DMZ between Vietnam and Laos, that they were reporting what they called wild forest men and females with human faces in large hairy bodies. And we went on this trip, and the first night we were staying, talk about rough accommodations, no toilets, no anything, but we had an empty cement building in which they had set up a whole bunch of thick mosquito netting, and each one of us was in a cot inside of this mosquito netting that was hard to get in and hard to get out. And at 2 a.m., for some reason, that's, I was able to see a clock, and that's why I know. At 2 a.m., I came straight up, and my head went into that mosquito netting. And what I was hearing was the same Sasquatch sound that I played tonight. And in fact, Art, I had taken the same audio with me so that the Hong Kong production crew could hear that eerie looping sound. And we had played it for some of the locals that day when we arrived, and they said in their language, yes, it's similar. Of all the things for me to wake up hearing, it was that high-pitched looping sound. And now I'm wondering whether this is come. If I tried to get out of the cot in the mosquito netting across, the crews were all laid out on floors, and then I'm making all that noise, I will miss hearing how long it goes on. And so, with equipment in a room about 50 feet away, I sat there in the dark, in that mosquito netting, and the Vietnam-Laos border, listening to this sound. And that was a true story. We never saw it. We interviewed people, and when we would take the locals, and they would take us to the site, they would take their arms and gesture as small people, but going and showing us the branch that they had seen, what they called the wild people, picking branches of fruit, and that branch, I think it was a cameraman got out a tape measure, and from the ground up to the branch was 14 feet. So,
I'm going to ask you about it. Everybody asks about this, and this one's going to. We're in America, fully urban environment. And my thought is going to be, how could an animal of that size possibly thrive basically on humans, and would we ever be seen? Would we ever, these rare occurrences we have, or certainly video is very rare and suspect for time as well. So how could an animal like that, or a small animal, whatever it is, thrive from all of us? What? Maybe? If you live out where I live or in on up to Oregon or Washington, this kind of country, you can go out for hours and hours and hours and see virtual reality. So we go around where people find that. So I sort of answered my own question, but the question is, why are they not seeing more?
The consensus, and this is a hypothesis because it's not proved, is that the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, wild man, Yeti live underground. And yeah, and that we are dealing with some sort of a primate species that, and I'm going to say these words, knowing I can't exactly prove it. To me, there's too much circumstantial evidence not to say it. That just like the documents that I've been exposed to in my work when I was working for HBO and other things that we can talk about in more detail, that extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapiens sapien, which is us, and those are words in an alleged government document, that the link between the Sasquatch Bigfoot and extraterrestrial deliberate creation of them to do work on this planet is strong. I have interviewed many people in reduction syndrome who have been on a craft during an abduction, and they have seen what they say are 8 to 9 foot tall, hairy Sasquatch or primate-looking entities on those crafts. And in Snohomish Beach, Bismarck, the sparkly suited people come down or beams, and then the Sasquatch. Now, if there is genetic manipulation of all kinds going on in the earth by advanced non-humans, what Michio Kaku would say in dividing the possibilities of the evolution of life in this 13.8 billion year old universe, that you've got the ability in a 4.6 billion year old solar system, which is what we're in, to have had at least another 8 billion before. And that if there are civilization trees out there, as Michio Kaku described, theorizing, they have the ability to gather energy from sun, to manipulate and fold space-time, and to genetically create anything that they want, to use it anywhere that they want in the universe, in any planet with specific gravity, specific atmosphere, and so forth. So now with that as sort of a quantum physicist lens, if you go then to the abduction syndrome and what is reported, if these Sasquatch creatures or Yeti or Laos, wherever they are actually here being work for something that we still don't even acknowledge as existing, and they were made or to be underground, because that way they would be preserved from interaction with Earth's surface life as it's been described to me, and that they have some ability that might not always necessarily be organic as we think of mammals or creatures, and why I bring this up. One of the most interesting sheriff's reports that I remember seeing when I started working on my documentary of Strange Harvest about the global animal mutilations was in the fall of 1979. And that was only 3 or 4 years after this sheriff's report had been filed with the Cascade County Sheriff's Office in Great Falls, Montana. And the report that went to the sheriff was from a rancher out hunting at a 30-06 rifle, came around a bend and confronted immediately in front of him was an 8 foot tall, reddish brown, long haired, looked like, I think he said, an orangutan or a primate. And without hesitating, the rancher grabbed his 30-06 rifle and shot. And the creature in front of him, this is a quote from the sheriff's report, disappeared in a flash of light.
That's not, okay, so it's not biological, or certainly not fully biological as a rule.
Or they are creatures who have the ability to escape Homo sapien surface life in ways that we do not understand, which goes to the heart of your question. The best source, I think, is Jimmy Chilcutt. He was a forensics expert working for the Conroe Police Department down in Conroe, Texas. And it was back around 2006, I think. I did an interview with him about work that he had been doing and cooperating with the anthropologist Jeff Moulton at Oregon State University at the time. They wanted to see how many plaster casts they could find that already existed. For Jimmy Chilcutt, he had specialized as a police officer in collecting all kinds of human footprints. And then he went to Georgia, went to a zoo with the police department's permission, and he did plaster casts on orangutans and chimpanzees and all of this to increase his ability to say, okay, this ridge, these toes, this heel are from somebody who lived, or it's not primate, or whatever it was. That's what Jimmy was doing. He was specializing in that. And he said to me that in one of the castings that Jeff Meldrum, the anthropologist studying the Sasquatch Bigfoot phenomenon, gave to him, that he came across what he said was, and I'm now reading from a Jimmy Chilcutt report, a 14-inch casting from Northern California in 1967. Now, a lot of scientists had seen this, and they had looked at this casting, but they all missed what I saw immediately, being now a latent fingerprint expert. These were dermal ridges, and they jumped out at me because the dermal ridges on this cast from the alleged Sasquatch displayed definitely not human characteristics, because they ran in a different direction. They had a different pattern flow than human feet, and they also had a slightly different pattern flow than primates, the non-humans that we have studied down in the zoo. So my first thought was, maybe these are fake ridges. But the more I studied them, the more I realized they could not have been fake. They were completely different ridges than I had ever seen in anything else. And we came to the conclusion, after I'd been a police officer for 23 years, working with footprints and handprints, that this was something that we could now use the dermal ridges in the plaster castings as one of the pieces of evidence that separated what we're calling the Sasquatch phenomenon from humans and other primates. And Jimmy Chilcutt, in that interview, told me he had not a single doubt that there was some sort of a primate-looking creature out there that was leaving footprints in mud and sand that were huge with dermal ridges that he himself said, this is it, this is what proves they are a different species.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I do. And the reason I do is because I have talked with so many people who have been in searches after the Sasquatch Bigfoot phenomenon, and I have read 3 or 4 books by scientists who have come at this from a zoology point of view. They want to prove it, and they can't yet prove it because they need the creature in some sort of either live in a cage would be preferable. And then you jump to, I personally feel that people in the abduction syndrome are trying to tell the truth to the best of their ability. And when somebody like Steve Bismarck says he saw this Sasquatch creature following those several blue-spotted extraterrestrial biological entities in the forest of Sahamish at a time when there were all of the gifts and light and animal mutilations and marks in the ground and all of the stuff that happened, I think that's another piece in the puzzle with Jeff Meldrum and Jimmy Chilcutt and the scientists, and you stand back and say, because we don't have survived live or dead yet, does not mean it's not on this planet underground.
Right, well, there's a great debate about whether a victim should be shot. There are those who swing, well, of course not, for rare and dangerous and lesson in the world is still. Others are convinced that no, we need that. We need that evidence. And I never saw that question.
I hate to see anything be killed. It's just my nature. I would not want to kill a Sasquatch. I don't know if they are retrievable in a live form, meaning they are so strong, so big, so smart, so agile, that maybe it's not possible to get them into a cage. But to shoot one, I think would just be horrible. So I don't.
So your answer would be no.
Yeah, my personal answer would be I would never shoot one.
I actually had someone on the show who had a very, very good story. I'm sure you remember that he shot a couple of people. And someone was very concerned, and I think rightfully so. It's a very good movie. I still don't know where those bodies are located.
No kidding.
Oh, okay, you know about this one.
Oh, wow. Well, that would be, you can still learn stuff about DNA from bones.
Well, I had sworn, and I didn't keep my word. He wasn't released me to do so over the past, short birthday. I had to show that for a marriage window that the case would become involved. I was certainly really unsure what he had killed. I mean, he had described as a victim. But you know, if you really, I didn't think it was so much that you shot these two pictures, and this concern about possibly being persecuted. His nickname was Brad. Welcome back.
Thank you, Art. And just to sort of connect to where we left off, and I was talking about Jimmy Chilcutt, I found during the break a quote from him in a 2000 interview that I did with him, and he had told Field & Stream magazine in an article about his work for the Texas Police Station Post. I can assure you, there is a planet up in the Pacific Northwest that we have never seen, close quote. And I think that that really sums up what everybody who seriously studies Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti thinks.
There seems to be increasing evidence. Now, there's human language as well, right?
There is Nelda Ketchum. She did a release earlier this year or at the end of last year, and it was about doing DNA sequencing that proves that the Sasquatch was a combination of Homo sapiens and a primate that was probably a lemur. Now, I interviewed her. I read her entire website. I have read all of the critiques of her, of which there have been more than any forged. And I think that part of the problem is that she did not have any easy way to work with, we call it formal laboratories, because as soon as she would tell them that she was trying to do genome sequencing on Sasquatch, they would back off. I don't know at this point the whole issue of contamination of DNA. That is a big deal. And neither you nor I or anybody would not do what's called the paper chain, where you know that you have the same person, the same process, the same, it's the tissue that has the DNA. But if you know where it goes, you know what lasts, you know where it's kept lost, it's dealt with. The whole chain, paper chain on true credible science means that you are always trying to protect against contamination. And in this story, what lab detection did, apparently it is hard to, or at least many scientists are critical that that is not confirmed or that it wasn't protected. And here, hardly any of us did a reality check on what was the contamination or lack of contamination, and that's the problem right now on that research. And contamination.
Let's try this. This is such an interesting question. First is the version, I mean, running the videos, showing mutilations and showing mutilations that can bring out. And it's horrible, but there are also illusions. In other words, if extraterrestrial brains are talking about one of those is what I was obeying on stream of others or flying through it or much from the middle of the field.
Well, I'll take you back for a moment to the first shot, like a 220-volt circuit that I had with just retired from the Logan County Sheriff's Office in Northern Colorado in Sterling, of the Sheriff's Grade. And from 1970 to 74 period, on when I sat with him for the first time in September of 1979, I was working on a documentary that was probably known as A Strange Harvest. And I started on it in 1979, the director of special projects for the studio and I did so because my piece was then has been, since I graduated from Stanford in 68. I was a pretty teacher. It was 1968 when I graduated. My theme was science and medicine and environmental issues. So in my work at Stanford, in the films that I was making when I got out. And Tex Gray was the first sheriff that I was referenced to as being somebody who had been by dead for about 236 mutilation sites. Think about that. One sheriff in one place, and knows that in the state of Colorado during that period of time, that each county in some section was having 200 animal mutilations. So in Colorado alone, in a 5 to 10 year period, there were thousands. There were thousands. So now I'm going for the first time, trying to get my therapies in a story that I only have when you're posted in the Rocky Mountain years and the TV stations away from my own communication, recording all these strange, bloodless, unusual deaths. So he was retired and he was in a vacuum cleaner shop in Logan that he was repairing vacuums after being a sheriff for so long. And he had vacuums for me, specifically to look at. I remember the count. Because I counted them all out on the floor, 266 color Polaroid photos that we had taken of all these mutilations. And as I went through, there was one particular one that I asked him about. It was a spear, a heavy spear, all black. Lying on his right side, and the front legs and the back legs were together so neatly in such neat parallel that it was artificial. That this was the way you should have photographed it at the mutilation site. Now, the 33 were on dry powder and they are neat. There's no movement, there's no struggle, there's no traps around his body, not even the spears or traps. And the head was found in a hole that the sheriff told me was 82 feet. And he said he stood there looking. The ear, the eye, the tongue, the jaw, the genitals, and the rest of them are gone. The legs are moved out a pen, no trap, and here the head was found in an 8-inch hole. And he said, Linda, the only conclusion that we can draw is that whatever distance this here kept all of the body completely, totally paralyzed and immobile, except for the head. And the head, in some sort of agony, dug a moving hole before it died. Now, I felt several things at that moment. I felt rage of what seemed cruelty. I felt fear about the technology that could do this. And then I said to Sheriff Gray, you're describing something philosophy. It's a building. As if they're almost like calling cards and the way these mutilations are done, whether they're horses and cattle or dogs and cats. It's every domestic animal that you can think of that I have seen photographs of deer, one that have been subjected to exactly the same level of excision, and the U.S. Forestry Service is known about them. And when I said to Sheriff Graves, it feels like something is flaunting. When you listen to me, smoking a cigarette, I and he said, the perpetrators of these animal mutilations are creatures from Africa. As it was that 220-volt circuit hit me, I was out of control from north into a brand new land. The sheriff had scored so far. And I remember when sheriff and I felt the of these unusual animal threats, and no traps around them, clean, and animal mutilation. They are difficult. And here's the thing that many people overlook. I reported it a lot, and I think people don't want it to be true, so they should have wanted this part out. Very short. We crossed the after crossing. Veterinarians will cut open one of these mutilated animals, in which there are no surgical incisions on the chest or abdomen part of the animal. But once it's stop, there is no heart muscle. The pericardium is there. There are no cuts in the pericardium. That's the translucent structure around the heart. And keep in mind, the heart of the self-power or womb is somewhere in the 7 by 9 by 11, which are huge muscles to get tight blood out of a very huge cow or even a heifer and even a cow. To get it out of the body without any incisions in the chest is considered impossible. And when you add on to it the tissue, there's a really which goes into the pericardium surrounds the cow's heart, in the pericardium surrounds our heart. And this lies in the chest. Excluded, there's no pulse, there's no blood, there's no fluid, there's no blood pump. And there's veterinarians that different first with test brain and digitizing and test clothing. The very first mutilation of a cow up around the film that he got to somewhere around 1974, and he asked the vet to come out and do a necropsy because he's looking at this, you're missing, I'm missing, tongue, jaw, genitals, and nothing poured out, and said, Linda, the cow was warm to touch. It was that fresh, and no blood, and no trash. So the best comfort. But that opens up how I dropped the process down in the field getting my watches from a car engine. But the field in a light door in a cow is very easy spicy, looking for all kinds of monopoly and he said, what happened there? Showed him there was no harm. Her party was there, no cut, no blood, and no tissue. So that's how don't call me out on another reason I was students to stand in front of the media and say, I didn't know I learned how this was done and it was impossible. Now that gives you the understanding of many variations of what happened between other marriages where new properties are real behind this one. Why law enforcement portrays to the local media as predators, bullies, or satanic powers. Really, that was a lie. This begins to move into a very difficult and complex and sensitive subject about genetic harvest from this planet, probably for millennia, in order to produce genetically manipulated containers that could be standing up Homo erectus primates, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens sapiens, DarkMAtter, plus every conceivable kind of every other container that you've ever heard of, from centaurs to unicorns. In experimentations on this planet, in this solar system, that has a particular gravity, a particular atmosphere, a lot of water. And when it comes to the why, it's even more difficult. And so I'm going to flesh out a little bit about this whole issue of a technology that can take genetic harvesting from whatever the entity or creature is, and then turn it into something else that is usable to the non-humans. I've done 4 books. 3 are big, 8.5 by 11, 400 some pages each. And I did that so that I could put big photographs, big documents, everything clear in these books. And in my 3rd book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, there's one entire section about what some abductees have referred to as resurrection technology. And one of the most dramatic in this whole, it's a big chapter, many people that have had this interaction with this technology. And one of the most dramatic was a woman named in the book, Linda Porter. And I drove from Los Angeles up to an area in Porterville, California to meet with her back when I began working on this book between 1994 and when Glimpses Volume 1 came out about animal mutilation, possible human disruptions, and the taxonomy that I did from the illustrations that people had done over 30 years. And then by 1998, Glimpses Volume 2 came out. So I was working on all of this between 1992 and 93. And that's when I went to see Linda Porter. And she had sent me the clearest she was an artist to begin with, of a series of drawings about what happened to her between her teenage years and about her 20s. And it included having a beam of light. Many people remember a beam of light. They don't exactly remember what happened, but she remembered a beam of light. And then, as a young teenager, she was inside of some kind of a craft or a round room. And what happened in very summarized for the radio broadcast tonight is that a praying mantis-looking creature, 8 foot tall, which does come up in lots of abductions, even if you don't hear about it much, appears, and at first she was terrified, and the tall praying mantis put into her mind a sense of deep sadness about her and all humans, and it was accompanied by a sense that this praying mantis was so ancient that it could be as old as our solar system, as incomprehensible as that is, and that these praying mantis are made, programmed to monitor the evolution of life in entire solar systems. We're getting into the world of Michio Kaku's theorizing about very advanced civilizations having this ability. And that when humans are in the presence of the praying mantis, the praying mantis has the ability to calm the human's natural fear of the way they look. And what he did next, he took the young teenage reporter to a round, small, almost like a small room, and showed her all this yellow, sparkly light inside of it. And then, I just say, this is one piece of what you need to understand. He walked her into a room nearby and said, watch. And now it's a gray type entity. We can get into the distinctions of gray androids that are robots and prime intelligence grays, and that there are all kinds. And now what she's seeing is what I would call more the prime intelligence in the gray category. They have vertical snake eyes, they have gray peppered skin, usually it's slightly reptilian, and they are in the chocolate form. I call them androids that has the big black eyes and the pear-shaped head and the little body. There's a big difference. So now she's in the presence of what appears to be a prime intelligence gray who walks over to a bed-like apparatus upon which there is lying a male human. And the gray reaches down, and she even, Linda, even asked me, could this be possible? Are they doing this in front of me like a hologram? Because this is what occurs. The gray's long, 4 fingers just seem to pass through the man's chest. And out of the man's chest, the gray being comes up holding the man's heart and shows it, no blood, totally dry, shows it to the porter, and she gets telepathic thoughts like this. It is important that the entity, and she gets the symbol or gets communication that when they say entity, they are meaning soul, spirit, the animus of life. But the man's entity and this particular container of the man's body, it's important that the soul remain inside of such a container for a longer period of time than the man's body is willing to give, because the man is dying of heart disease. And the gray communicates that they are letting this version of the man die, But over in the tube, and when there's a gesture, now she sees that there are these tubes that have various people in them. And one she recognizes in the tube that has light above and light below is a man who looks a little bit younger than the man on the table. And the gray being communicates telepathically to her. Because it is important for the soul spirit, that he uses the word entity, to stay inside of this type of container, we are going to revivify him in this coiled body, in this tube that we can preserve and control. And we are going to put him in Australia, and in his home in the United States, he will die. So the non-human life are showing the teenagers that they have the ability to allow the container to die while they simultaneously are resurrecting a closed, preserved body, because there is something extremely important to study about the soul-spirit interaction with Homo sapiens. This is very complex, and we can keep going in this.
That soul, that is he was a case study, and for some reason, they needed that soul to continue.
Well, what is part, because I don't think they're studying just one thing. I think this is a huge, complex 16-layer chess game that's going on concerning various agendas by various non-humans, and the non-humans themselves may not always get along about this political question. What is allowable to do with life? If Homo sapiens is the product of genetic manipulation in already evolving primates, going back to Homo erectus, as the alleged presidential briefing paper that I was shown at Kirtland Air Force Base on April 9, 1983 said, it says that in there, then we must have been made the way we are, with our tendency toward violence and self-destruction and all the things that humans are, for some reason. And there have been so many wars on this planet in arguments about whose God is superior to another. All these wars have produced the death of containers. Now, if you step back a little bit wider, and you go back to a discussion that I had back in the early 1980s when I was still working on animal mutilation with a man that I later learned his paycheck came from the Central Intelligence Agency, but the outside world, he would have been a military person. And he told me that he had been exposed to the whole concept of Truman and the Majestic 12, and that he had some assignment in the military having to do with non-humans, in which our government was trying to do rudimentary communication with some type of the grays, that they found that the very tall blondes and the tall red-haired types wouldn't communicate, and that there was this other group. Here's another thing that no one wants to be true. People will say the idea of standing with lizards or standing with alligators is so repugnant, and they won't go there, even though abductees say this is another type present in all of this. I always ask people who say that's not possible, that's somebody making up a science fiction story. Our own biblical history has a Garden of Eden in which Adam and Eve are there, allegedly as first human form. And one is there also, a very intelligent serpent that communicates with Eve all about things like getting out of the garden and learning about technology, science, life, and all of these things that are called the temptation of Eve and the dropping of the innocence of the first prime Homo sapiens. Well, who is that serpent in the Garden of Eden for real? And what is the relationship between the historic reptilian undercurrent in so much religious literature and the gray beings, the prime intelligence with the snake-like eyes, and the tall, blonde, and red-haired humanoids that can have either crystal blue eyes or the blondes have been seen with very bold eyes like the Greeks. People don't realize that the Greeks on this planet are the only ones in bloodlines that have very yellow gold eyes. Some of them, I have a cousin who's Greek and she has yellow gold eyes. And that there are all kinds of contradictions and confusions about all religious and earth history. But when you come to these stories that I've run into and have published in glimpses of other realities about people being shown by beings, mixtures of beings, that their body and the relationship of the container to the soul spirit has some very profound meaning to these non-humans when they are trying to study it. And one day, in discussing all of this with colleagues, somebody suggested that I study the Gnostics, going back to Zoroaster and Zoroastrianism. And the interesting thing is, when you go back to that over 2,000 years of literature, you run into let's just call it a big box view of the cosmos and how this universe is working. It has to do with the recycling of souls in a reincarnated process that is the machinery of the universe in which the soul births the animals in each life goes in and out of different containers, sort of like one metaphor was think of a sewing machine and the way the needle goes in and out of stitches. Any soul bird could have that many stitches up and down in and out of body. And we have been told historically in the current age, reincarnation has been set off to the side as possible mythology. The idea of tall reptilian humanoids has been set off into the realm of science fiction. That the idea of the serpent having something to do with the beginning of humans is set as mythology. These are all the words that put insulation between what might have been historically extraterrestrial biological entities terraforming, and that's the word, terraforming, and manipulating genetic material on the surface of this planet. And then I'm going to give you a number of art that was given to me in 1999 by a man who had retired from the Defense Intelligence Agency. I wrote about this in my book because it is somehow when people buy a book and they read it, they're giving their permission to read all of the information in the book. When it came to radio and television, I have been shy, sensitive, aware that this is very difficult material, but this is getting toward the end of 2013, and I think a lot of people feel the same way that you and I and others do, that we seem to be coming to some sort of a critical juncture in the evolution of this planet. The feeling on the whole earth now reminds me of when you heat up water on a stove. You can see it become sort of jittery, but there comes that moment when it goes from the water